right.
Yeah. Well, let's get started. I want to make sure that we're getting everything going on time, and we just really appreciate everyone joining us today. I think we'll have a few more people kind of trickle in as we get started. But this is our second virtual event in the series of FLC Alumni Together. We are so thrilled that we're able to provide some programming for alumni during this time, during this very strange, odd time. Today's topic is bike preparation, exercise consideration, and tips. I am Kristen Knott. I am the Director of Alumni Engagement at Fort Lewis College. Ian, who a few of you saw sign in early, he is also from the Alumni Engagement Office, so there's a few of us representing today. And a couple things to note first, we will be recording this session, so this can be viewed at a later time, and you can watch it as many times as you want to, so that'll be really fun. We're working on building out a website right now that will host upcoming webinars as well as past ones, so keep your eyes out for that new website. And to talk a little bit about Zoom and the functions, we'll be asking some casual questions here and there, and that's where the chat function is really valuable and super appreciated. But when you are asking questions of Rotem, please go ahead and use the Q&A button at the bottom. That helps us just kind of keep track of what we've already answered, what we still need to get to, and just kind of monitor that just a little bit easier. So kind of going through a little bit of what Zoom is, but I'm sure that you all have had extensive experience with Zoom at this point. So again, today's guest speaker is Rotem Ishay. Rotem, thank you so much for being here. Let me quickly read off a little bit of your bio because it is impressive. We're just really excited that you're here. So originally from Israel, Rotem spent most of his early years racing mountain bikes in Israel and Europe at the highest competition levels. After dominating the Israel racing scene and finishing his mandatory service with the Israel Air Force as an athlete of excellence, Rotem moved to Durango in 2008 to attend Fort Lewis College in pursuit of valuable academic experience while pushing towards his goal as a professional cyclist. Rotem quickly rode to the top of collegiate cycling and signed with the team Jamis Bikes. After graduating with honors from the Exercise Science Department in 2012, Rotem balanced life between racing professionally and working full-time as an exercise physiologist and endurance coach with Durango Performance Center, the local fitness and performance sports lab that merged with FLC a few years back. And we're so glad that you're on campus, Rotem. That's so exciting.
Me too.
Good. Highlights of his professional cycling career include 9-time Israel champion, 7-time US collegiate champion, many top 10s in US Cup, multiple top 50s in World Championships and World Cups, and being an integral part of 2 Israel Olympic campaigns. Rotem brings a vast experience and passion into recreational and performance exercise, endurance, physiology, coaching, bike maintenance, bike fitting, and more. Nowadays, in his free time, Rotem enjoys staying fit, running, biking, basketball, riding horses, and practicing his roping skills. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon, Rotem. The virtual floor is yours, and we can't wait to learn about our bikes.
Thank you so much, Krista. I appreciate that. It is a pleasure to be here as well. And, you know, just looking back at the years at Fort Lewis, those college years were definitely some of the best years of my life. And the Fort Lewis General has been a pivotal point for me. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about bike preparation, fitness preparation, and everything kind of in light of the Corona, COVID-19 shenanigans that are going on right now. So I think the best way to go about this, and I've talked to Krista, what would be like the best way for me to give this lecture or presentation is, I have a few points that I want to cover that I think are important. And I invite you to stop at any time during my presentation and go down to the Q&A and write a question right away if I'm talking about a topic that you want to ask a question if I didn't answer it. So at any point, Krista will see those questions and she will interrupt me and tell me the question, and then I'll answer that, try to answer that to the best that I can, and then we'll keep moving from one point to another that I have. And then kind of when I'm done with my points, then maybe we'll answer some more open questions that you guys and ladies might have. And yeah, so hopefully I'll be able to enrich you with some information. So without any further ado, I want to start with bike prep. Okay, so I believe many of us have already started biking here. I mean, a lot of us try to find the dry trails here in Durango as soon as, you know, there's snow's melting off. We try to find the 1 or 2 dry trails here and ride them like a zillion times because they're only dry trails. But I think even though if you've ridden already some, I think it's still important to go through this bike preparation. So the first thing I would say is you want to do kind of a bolt check for your bike, okay? I'd say, especially if your bike has been in the garage over the winter and didn't really touch them, it's probably important to do so. Some of the things that I will check, okay, with bolt check, and I will start with the headset, okay, that it's locked in place, and a good way to do that, and I'll have to take my bike off of here to show you, is actually place them on the ground and stand on top of them, press on the front brake, and kind of wiggle it forward and backward a little bit. Because that way you can feel if there's some play in that headset, okay? And if need so, if you feel some play, then you can open the stem bolts and then tighten a little bit the headset steer bolt over here. Don't over tighten this one. It should not be tightened all the way, but it should be to some degree tightened, and then you tighten those stem bolts again. So that's what I would start with. Get this bike back here. Few more important bolts are the handlebar to stem bolts over here. So once again, when the bike are on the ground, you can kind of try to twist your handlebar and see if it's going free or not. Tighten those ones. You want to check the wheels. Okay, I don't know if you have a quick release or a through axle, whatever type of way your bike is using to lock the wheels in. You want to check that they're locked in. Front wheel, rear wheel, just check for play, kind of try to move it. And when you're moving the rear wheel, if you have a full suspension, then your wheel might be tightened all the way to the frame, but then sometimes if you feel some play, it could be some of the bearings over here that are maybe worn out, or maybe one of the bolts are loose. So if you're moving that wheel side to side by holding it like so and moving it side to side, you feel some play, then you need to figure out, okay, is it coming from the bearings? Is it coming from just through axle quick release or not tightened? So you want to kind of figure out where that play is coming from. Other things is also the seat collar. So it's that bolt, that clamp over here, which attaches the seat post to the frame. Many times riders don't tighten it good enough or to the specifications. And then what happens is they start riding and then their saddle goes down a little bit and they don't notice it. And then next thing you know, the saddle is too low, then they start getting knee pain, especially if they suddenly start riding more, which what happens in the spring. And then I see them in my lab and then they're trying to do a bike fit and see, oh, what happened? Why do I have knee pain? So check that bolt as well, the seat clamp. I'd say those are like the big ones to start with. Obviously, there are more and more bolts you can check, but I think those are the big ones to start with. One thing that can save you from a lot of trouble, and I know some people can be lazy about it, but there's no way around it. When you are doing deep cleaning to the bike and not just like spraying them off and kind of giving them a cleaning, when you do a deep cleaning, then you're able to see any issues, okay? And what I mean by deep cleaning is, you know, brushing the cassette and also going through the spokes of the wheel with some kind of a sponge or a towel and going one by one. That way you can feel the tension in the spokes as well if there's no one loose spoke that's about to break off. Obviously cleaning the chain really well. So, give it 45 minutes, for a deep clean. When you start your season, it'll be worth it because you'll be able to see early problems that might save you dollars down the road if you can notice them now before they really crack and become a really major problem afterwards. Shocks. So shocks are something that people assume that always work perfectly as long as you put the air pressure. Shocks are such a big riding experience. So it's not just about setting the air pressure, which I hope you guys know. Everybody should have in their toolbox, a small toolbox at home, should have a shock pump where you can adjust the air pressure for the front shock, the fork, and the rear shock. But besides that, it is recommended that you put your shocks through service. They say 50 hours, I think 50 to 75 hours. They're also very dependent on your use. So for an example, if you're riding in British Columbia and it's like muddy and rainy all the time on every hour of riding, so yeah, you probably want to service it 50 hours or maybe even before. If you're riding around here and you don't go through so much abuse, then maybe you can lean towards 75 hours of use. Service, bike shops can do it. We do have a shock specialist here in town. His business name is Diaz Suspension Designs, and he does great work. Except for the shock service, he also does custom shock tuning, which makes it feel pretty smooth because every shock comes standard. You do change the air pressure, but it comes standard from the factory, and if you can do some customing to your riding style and obviously your weight, then it just feels better that way. So that's kind of about shocks. Well, I guess I should mention a general rule of thumb in order to know what's the right air pressure for you in your shocks is most shocks will have some kind of a rubber band over here. Or over here, typically, it's on the other side over here. So that rubber band, you put it all the way down when you don't have any weight on the bike. And then when you sit on the bike, it should, with all your equipment, with helmets, with your camelback, whatever you're typically riding with, then the rubber band should sag about 20 to 30%. 20% being the shock is pretty firm, 30% being the shock is pretty soft. Okay, within that range, it's more for kind of like what riding style you desire to ride in, or what type of terrain you're riding in.
Great, Rotem, we do have a quick question about brakes. What about bubbles in your brakes? Is it easy to bleed on your own?
Depending on your brakes, I have to say, depending on the brand, some brakes are harder than others. But it's not a major deal. Yeah, and there are plenty of YouTube video clips to show you how to do that. So you just Google the brand and model, make and model of that brakes, and just write rebleed, and there are plenty of video clips. And it's pretty easy. You do need a few tools, the rebleed kit, but otherwise it's pretty simple. Does that answer the question?
I believe it does.
Okay. So something that I've heard a question before in an email before was tire pressure. Tire pressure there's a huge range, okay, because it depends on the size of tires, size of the wheels, if it's a hardtail, a full suspension, and obviously the big one is the weight of the rider. If we're talking about the vast majority of bikes today, which are 29-inch wheels and 2.2 width tires to about 2.5, if you take a light person, say 140 pounds, then we're talking about around 20, 24 PSI. if we're talking about a heavier fella, say maybe closer to 200 pounds, then that probably jumps up to about 30 to 35. Okay, so it really depends, and every single tire manufacturer, for example, I know with this tire manufacturer, Vittoria, if you go online, they have a chart where you put in your weight, you put in riding style and whatever tire you use, and they can give you kind of a PSI range of what you should use for front wheel, for rear wheel. So there's a lot of information there. Oh, also talking about tires. So one thing I greatly recommend that everybody needs to do once they start riding in the sprint is to refresh their sealant in their tires, because you're probably gonna open those tires up and there's like a big monster of sealant. So you probably want to kind of unpop those tubeless tires. If you're using tubeless tires, which I'm assuming that's the most common way of using a tire combination today, tire wheel combination. So you want to kind of pop one bead, one side of the tires, and clean out all the remaining sealant, especially if there are any monsters over there, small sealant monsters, take them out, and then put some sealant in there, and then close it up and pump the tire again. Okay, I'll save you, obviously, if you're in the trail and you have just a little bit sealant and it's not enough and you're gonna get a hole at some point, and you're just gonna like get crazy about the fact why is it not really sealing, but the sealant doesn't really work, it dried up already. Last, I'd say, at least for what I have for bike prep, is cleaning and lubing the chain. Pretty simple. I'd like to go, it seems like a lot of people have kind of like their own way to do it, and I'd like to show my way of doing it. I lube my chain almost every ride here, and I think the reasoning for that is Durango is very dry and it's mostly dusty riding. I mean, here in our conditions, here in Durango at least, if it's rainy, you typically don't ride outside because you are going to damage the trail in most cases. So I use a very kind of dry lube, which doesn't last long on the chain. So it lasts for a ride, maybe two. So I do it more frequently. I do not use waxed-based lubes over here. I would use them if I would go to more wet conditions. But here, something like the T9 lube, or I'm using here, I think it's like Tech. It's called Tech. I love this one. So the way that I go about it is, first of all, I kind of clean off with a dirty rag or whatever, hopefully a clean rag. I clean off the chain from just the dust from the last ride. So let me show you off this way. So I just hold it at the bottom part, the chain here, and spin backwards. Okay, so just to take off kind of like the top layer of dust from the last ride. And then I lube the chain, and I kind of use a method of lubing here. I know a lot of people say, oh, you should lube here or lube right above the cassette. I don't like to do it above the cassette because, I mean, sometimes you kind of miss a little bit and you get some lube on the cassette or on the derailleur. I want to be more precise, so I just go right on top of the chain over here. And then once I'm done doing one loop of the chain lubing over here, then I would actually hold the lube container on the side and lube also the side of the chain. And after doing that, then I would, with my fingers, I will hold the chain with my fingers and spin back and kind of move the lube all over the chain, all over the sides, because big part of lubing the chain is not just the top part, it's also the sides of the chain, which the sides of the chain are actually what is kind of determining how efficient or how precise the chain will move up or down a gear. Okay, that's what the derailleur is kind of moving it to one gear or another on the cob and the rear cassette. So the sides of the chain are also very important to lube. And then I typically do like double layer, as I mentioned. And after doing that, I take the towel again, a different one, not the one with the dirty, not the one with all the dirty stuff that I cleaned beforehand. And then I kind of rub it off one more time over here just to take the extra lube off of it, if that makes sense. Let's see, otherwise with bike prep, let's see. Yeah, I'll show you. Thought maybe it would be interesting for some people to show them what I take with me on just a casual, say an hour to a couple hours ride with me. Sometimes I take this kind of fanny pack with me, but sometimes I have this equipment on a saddlebag, just like this one, depending on how long I ride and what I feel like putting on. Obviously a tube. And I always carry a multi-tool with me with a chain breaker, okay? That's always very important. So even though I do have a pump, I always carry with me one of those. So that's a CO2, a single CO2 cartridge with kind of like the head of it. So if in case, it's getting close to dark and I just hit a flat or whatever, I can just do it real quick and get home back quick. Tire lever and a couple lifesavers. So lifesavers for me, and that saved me a lot of time, is I have small zip ties that I carry, and I do carry with me two types of tire plugs. I have the small ones, which a lot of people like to call them the bacon ones, bacon strips, because just they look like bacon strips. I don't know if you can kind of see it over here. Let me see. So those are pretty small ones for really small holes, and then I have another brand that's for bigger holes, and I have them like ready. So I have those things pretty much ready to plug them in. That can save you changing a tube sometimes, many times actually, and they last for a long while. Actually, on this tire, I have one tire plug that's been on there for probably almost 2 months now, and it's still holding well. Yeah, so I think that's kind of it. That's pretty much what I have over here. Yeah. Oh, and then I always carry with me some kind of Ziploc, because in Durango weather, you just never know if it's going to rain. So sometimes, even though you think there's no way it's going to rain, but it does, then you want to put your phone in a Ziploc bag. That's kind of it on bike prep. Any questions about bike prep?
We'll give some time. Please use the Q&A function. We haven't had any come in just yet, but I'll be monitoring.
Okay, cool. So I guess we'll move on to kind of exercise points that I have. Does that sound good?
I think that's great.
Awesome.
Oh, hang on, we do have one Q&A. Can you talk about local trail conditions?
What in specific about their condition?
They did not specify.
I'm not sure what the question is. I don't know. Most trails that are in town are pretty good. I actually rode, what was it, Sunday, I rode up to Dry Fork all the way up to Colorado Trail, where it hits Colorado Trail, and there was only two spots of mud, but they were totally rideable. So it's probably getting pretty good also on the Colorado Trail. I don't know how far up, probably not High Point, but most trails are getting dry and getting a lot of use now. So yeah, which will take me into another point in terms of how to ride smartly on our trails these days because of COVID-19.
And we got several questions come in since, some through the Q&A and one through the chat. I'm gonna hit the Q&A first. We got one from Kyle. Can you talk about adjusting shifting?
Adjusting what? Shifting?
Shifting.
Okay. So adjusting shifting on the fly. So it's going to be a little bit hard for me to demonstrate over here. First of all, it's hard to see it from just the computer, but I'll talk about it in as simple manner as possible. So typically, most derailleurs that are cabled, this derailleur combination is electric shifting, so there's no wires at all. But with cable shifting, you would have a barrel either at the back end of the derailleur or at the shifter. Mostly there will be definitely at the shifter, and then sometimes they do or they do not have an adjusting barrel in the derailleur. What you want to look at is, so if you're, say, in the middle of the cassette, and you're shifting a gear and it's not going one way or another. Say you're trying to shift down the cassette and it's not shifting, it's kind of like getting stuck over there and give you that annoying noise. Then try to shift the barrel one way or another. Now it depends on which barrel we're talking about, so it's going to be hard for me to really explain without seeing your specific bike. But you want to essentially release cable or take more cable. That way it'll help the derailleur move the line of the derailleur, the line of the pulleys one way or another. So if you see that it's not going down or not going up, then keep it, like try to shift it and keep it there while it's still making that noise, and then try to shift the barrel and see if it helps it. If you're moving it one way, and once it'll help it, and at some point the gear will jump and the chain will stay on there. If that makes sense. Once you move that the barrel, and that worked for that gear, then keep on trying for the rest of the gears. Go up and down a couple of times, and then you'll kind of find a sweet spot where it works for all the gears. If you can't find a sweet spot, meaning that for some gears the way you had the barrel adjusted is good, but then in other gears it doesn't work, then that's probably those are some other issues. Could be so many issues with that. It could be chain, it could be cassette wear, it could be your derailleur is twisted, but those are something that you don't really want to try to do on the fly on the ride. Probably take it to a local bike shop. But if just messing around with the barrel adjuster would help, then that's something that, yeah, I do it many times on a ride. A little bit less now with this electric shifting, which is pretty nice, that actually adjusts itself as well. But with the cable shifting, you can do that, and you can even do it while you're actually riding it on the bike if you have the barrel adjuster at the shifter, so you can ride on the road and try to shift and it's making those noises, and then you shift the barrel, either release cable or get more cable back. That way you can move the chain line one way or another. I hope that helps.
Awesome, I think so. Another question is, where should we avoid right now? Any trails really packed?
I have to say it was a month back, and I was riding daily, and I noticed that Horse Gulch was so packed, especially in the afternoon, that since then I have not went to Horse Gulch. It's also, I mean, I'll just touch right now and say, in light of the COVID-19 right now, is the smartest thing to do, if you do choose to take the risk of riding the bike outside, not that it's to say that it's a great risk, but I mean, just going outside of your house, it's already a risk nowadays to some degree. So if you are riding, I would greatly recommend either riding by yourself or with your housemates, and avoiding high traffic type of trails, okay? The reasoning that I'm looking at that way is, I know they say 6 feet social distancing, but the thing is, as we know, most of us have learned, is the COVID-19 is carried in the air by means of respiration. Okay, so it's respiratory droplets. So normal breathing, they say, 6 feet away, keep yourself safe. If you're at some shop or whatever, Home Depot or City Market, whatever. But when you're exercising, you're multiplying your respiration rate by many, many, many times, okay? The liters of air that are coming into you and out from every person exercising is so much greater. That's why I really think that when you're exercising outside, you should exercise much greater safety bubble. Because, I mean, if you're riding with buddies who are not your housemates, and you're thinking, oh, I mean, we're just riding outside and we'll keep 6 feet apart. But if you or another person, doesn't matter, is leading the trail and they're breathing out and you're riding behind them, it's carried in the air and you're riding into that cloud of air that they're expiring, or just standing in kind of like a trail intersection, and you might be 6 feet apart, but it's just that I think that bubble just is bigger when you're exercising. That's what I'm trying to say.
That makes sense. I'm gonna hop over to the question that was in chat. I will read this all out. I had a flat on my tubeless GRVL tires the other day and the glue didn't hold. Thoughts on bringing a plug with you? My boyfriend had one and it plugged it well for the rest of the way. Do you think it's okay to bring a plug with tubeless, as it's so nice to have a little plug kit rather than tubes and CO2 and so on? Any suggestions on what plug kits you use?
I definitely think that it's smart having plugs with you. I personally would not go on a ride with just plugs and no tube, because sometimes their tire slices is not just a small puncture or small holes. Sometimes there can be like a complete tear in the tire where the plugs are just not going to hold. So you always want to have a tube with you. Having the plugs is just kind of how to say it. It's kind of an easier, probably. Most flats that you'll get, most punctures are going to be small, so it's kind of like a quick way to fix that without opening the tire, getting your wheel off, opening the tire, switching to a tube, and all that type of stuff. So plugs, I mean, they're very light to carry. I also carry the CO2 just because, like I told you, I always feel like it's good to have a quick way to do it, but a pump might do it as well. If you're deciding only to carry a CO2, I'd say it's kind of risky, because if you're only taking one CO2 and if that CO2 doesn't hold and you don't have a pump, then I mean you might need to call your boyfriend to pick you up. So it's kind of your decision on if you want to just ride it with the CO2, and it might be good for like a short ride where if it's just an hour ride and if it's a blow up, then I can walk back to the car and it's not that bad. I carry both. I don't mind carrying extra on my ride. Yeah. And I guess let's see what I think was suggestions on what plugs kits to use. I think it's called, these ones, what are they called? Brand is green. It's like Genuine Innovations, I believe. It's kind of their logo and everything is green. You can buy them at Second Half Sports, and it's very light. I mean, it's really small. It's a tiny type of tool, and then you can always buy extra bacon strips, as they call it, more plugins. So yeah, hope that helps. Any other questions?
Yes, we have 3 more, but I think one is best for the end. So going back up to Percy's question, how about if I hang my bike from the ceiling, how much will that affect my disc brake fluid?
Sir, if you can ask me that again?
Yeah. How about if I hang my bike from the ceiling, how much will that affect my disc brake fluid?
It should not. It should not affect it that much. I mean, maybe if you hang it up and then you bring the bike back down, the first few presses on the brakes might feel a little bit wonky, but it should adjust itself. If you have issues with that, it's probably you have too much air bubbles in your system, in your brake system, and you need to do a complete rebleed.
Great. And then thoughts on Zwifting?
Oh boy. So a big motto of mine, in terms of training personally, but coaching as well. My big thing is chase your motivation. So I feel if there's any way that can give you more motivation to put more effort out there, I think it's blessed. So I think it's a good thing to do nowadays, because getting out the door every day, if that's too much of a risk for you, then maybe you can kind of switch it between doing Zwift, and there are enough races or enough challenges or enough interesting routes to do out there that you can kind of keep yourself fit while still not kind of bore yourself with riding indoors too much. I mean, most of us are here in Durango because we want to be outdoors and not sit inside and do Zwift. But, times now are a little bit different. So maybe it's the time to do Zwift a couple times a week. And I think that might be a good thing. And it's important with some of the athletes, for an example, that I coach, it's important not to get hung up with the numbers or just how well you're doing or not, because everybody has a different sense of motivation when training indoors, and everybody has a little bit different setup when it comes to their power meters or how their power is transferred to the Zwift app. So I've had really strong athletes who, I don't know, their power meter just doesn't show good data, or their trainer is not doing well, and they're a little bit discouraged, and it takes away motivation. And I think it's important to focus more kind of internally on, am I just getting a good effort out of this, and that's what matters. So it should be just used as kind of like a cool, neat way, especially nowadays, to get motivation that's not existent outside, because maybe we can't do group rides, or we can't do those maybe TuesNet World simulations or whatever people like to do to get their energies out. So Zwift might be a good way. Just kind of judge yourself more kind of internally of whether you're getting a good effort or not, and not by your score or result or whatever.
Ooh, I got a real good question. What is Zwift?
What is Zwift? Zwift is an online platform for people all over the world to ride with or against each other in a virtual world. So you put your bike on an indoor trainer, you put your bike on an indoor trainer, and you connect that trainer to a computer, and then you ride indoors in front of that computer, and that you pretty much ride in a virtual world. So you can pick, for an example, I want to ride the Rio 2016 Olympic course, or I want to ride this imaginary volcano mountain, okay? And then you ride with other people around you, and then there are sections or segments where you can kind of push really hard and see how you compare your time on this long climb or long segment, doesn't matter, how you compare to other people. And it's such a social platform where people join in on the ride. So it's not just, I mean, you could just ride, just go by yourself and ride the cool course by yourself and do your own training. But the whole concept about that, it's a social platform where you look online and say, okay, this group, who might be even your friends, or it could be some random people who you don't know, there's a group of people who are riding at 5 p.m. and they're doing 30 miles at this pace. And they classify riders by, I think there's like A, B, C, or D. So you can kind of pick your groups as well to what level you want to ride with. It could be a race, or it could be just a group ride where people ride together and they even chat. There's a kind of a chat bar on the side. So it could be pretty entertaining. It definitely makes indoor riding more interesting. I'm the kind of person who's, I've always been, if the weather is bad outside, then I'd rather figure out a different workout, either to do outside if it's skiing, or if it's raining, then I'll just go to a gym or do something indoors differently. But here and there, I still do indoor biking rides here and there, but not as often.
Awesome. And just more of a comment. Charlotte said, "Thank you so much for doing this, and Zwift is amazing."
All right. Hope you enjoy this season of biking.
Yeah. And then we have one more question, but I think I'll save it to the end if you want to keep going with your presentation.
Okay. Awesome. So a couple points I had for exercise. Now, it's important for me to mention that I'm not your physician, so I don't know any issues that you may or may not have. I do not know your fitness level, so it's important that you will consult your physician before making any decisions. Okay, these are guidelines, but by no means a call for action. You should consult your physician before doing any type of exercise. With that said, let's see. One thing that I've noticed actually is people are riding more and more outside, and we need to consider the effects of warmer weather, even though it hasn't been too hot nowadays yet. The effects of also riding under the sun suddenly from, wearing long layers and then suddenly riding outside under the sun as well, and in dry conditions for the people here in Durango. So you need to consider that as well, because the stress on your body from all this heat accumulating is pretty big. If it's from sun exposure, if it's from warmer weather, and the dry conditions as well. Keeping yourself hydrated, actually even to say pre-hydrated even before ride. So if you know that you might be going into a ride where you have not been hydrating well that day, then just be easy on yourself, okay? And also, just plain water is not necessarily the smartest thing to do if you're planning on rides that are longer than an hour or an hour and a half. After an hour, you're probably going to be fine. But when you're kind of hitting that hour mark, then you want to be attentive to your status of hydration before the ride, when you start the ride, and then how well you're hydrating during the ride. So when I meant just water, in comparison, you should do some type of electrolyte drink. It doesn't have to be too sweet. It doesn't have to be, just maybe try to avoid the calories. Sometimes what I like to do, if I know that I'm going on a ride that's not necessarily intense, and I don't really need the calories, is just I dilute half of what they recommend and just add a little bit more salt. So I hold the water better, but then on the other end, I don't just get extra calories that comes along with many of the electrolyte drinks. Another thing, let's see, bike fitting. So a lot of people, especially from getting and going from the spring, they're going on their bikes and they want to rip all the trails around town, and they ride too much in the beginning, and that if they don't have a good bike fit, they're pretty much are due for some kind of injury sooner or later. Your bike shop where you bought your bike, or any local bike shop, can give you a basic bike fit. It's not professional, but it would be just a good enough bike fit to get you going. But if you have any issues, or you riding more than 3 days a week, and especially if you clipped into your pedals, a professional bike fit is recommended. That's something that we do offer at Fort Lewis at our lab, Durango Performance Center. It's something that will save you maybe even physical therapy afterwards. So it's something that, and also, it's just better comfort. You're going to increase your power, and also just be more efficient on the bike as well. Let's see. Any questions so far?
We'll wait to see if anyone has any other questions.
Okay. So with the COVID-19, a couple of notes about that is, I mean, most of us, I believe, are here in Durango, but I think it's first and most important to consider your local restrictions or recommendations. Obviously, every place is a little bit different. So be attentive and know kind of what's the situation around your area. Some areas are better than others. Not to mention that some areas, they just don't allow to go outside. So that's to start with. I think it's important for people to understand that these days, I mean, I know Durango, we're in our bubble, we're a little bit better place compared to other spots in the U.S. right now. But in general perspective, we need to realize that every time that we step out the door, we're taking some level of risk, and it's about our measures to know if that risk is something that we're willing to take in order to keep our sanity and ride our bike and be outdoors, or maybe we should reconsider the way we're doing stuff. And I'll give you an example, like when I mentioned a month ago when I rode in Horse Gulch, and I was riding daily, but then I realized that it's just too many people, and I feel like at that point the public health administration here did not give specifics on that, and people were kind of taking it to the end of like, oh, we're going to ride in groups, but we're barely going to be, in good enough social distancing. So I saw that it was a little bit hectic, and I decided this risk is too much for me riding at those hours of the day at this trail network. So I decided to avoid that. Maybe nowadays, it would be smart to some people just riding the roads or the dirt roads where you're not going to see much people, because a lot of people want to ride the trails nowadays. And also with the trails, there is always the risk of you're coming around the corner, even if you're not riding fast, but you're suddenly in front of a person and you're less than 6 feet away. Okay, so maybe just riding dirt roads, which we have plenty of beautiful dirt roads around here, might be a good solution. So you first need to understand kind of like what's the risk that you're willing to take. Some means to decrease that risk. First of all, as I mentioned beforehand, is we need to understand that this 6 feet social distancing rule of thumb, I believe, does not apply when exercising. It should be greater space, a greater bubble. Always ride solo or with your housemates. I personally do not believe that it's a good time to ride with others, even if you try to keep that bubble. It's just too much of a risk, because you are, even if that person is more than 10 feet away, they're always breathing around you, and you're always in a very close by area. Use mask if possible. And that's kind of hard, because if you're exercising at an intensity where you need to breathe, quick, you need to, heart rate is somewhat higher, you want to get up a climb, then it's going to be hard breathing through a mask. Okay, so, but if you're going for just like a jog or a very easy kind of ride, spin on the bike, then maybe you can do it with a mask, and that would be even better. I would say, not that I think that there's much research on it or anything, but using long finger gloves and then making sure to wash those gloves, riding with those gloves every ride might be a smart thing, but it still doesn't to say that, I mean, you can use the gloves and then get infected by touching something and then touching your face, so it doesn't really matter. You still need to be aware of what you're touching with your hands. I think actually one thing that I did not mention yet, but it's a very important one, is low risk riding. And that is very much applies to, I'd say, even more mountain bikers, especially now in the spring. We all get out there and we want to be rad, and we want to, do all the trails and jumps and turns and everything that we've done last summer. Now is not the time to be rad. Now is the time to just build your fitness and take care of your mental and physical health. So, kind of take a chill pill and do everything at like 70-80% of the speed that you always want to ride it. So go a little bit slower. It'll be fine. There'll be times to go at it again, because you don't want to be a burden on the healthcare system. But also, I think just generally the hospital, especially nowadays, is the last place you want to visit. Yeah. Another note is when I just mentioned it before, is you want to progress slowly. Okay. Another perspective to think about it, not just from the place of kind of like the common sense of you don't want to start training too hard, that way you get fatigued, but also in a way where you need to be aware that hard training is actually kind of suppressing your immune system. Okay, so if you do any training that for your fitness right now is considered more than moderate, you need to be aware that your immune system is going to be suppressed for the hours or maybe even days later. So probably right now, anywhere between low to moderate type of workload, kind of overall workload of that day of training is probably the smartest thing to do, okay? And that's very subjective. For some people, a moderate workload might be just an hour 20 of riding, and for some other people could be 4 hours with tempo sections up the climbs. So it's a very personal, okay? Let's see. Another thing is take everything with you, on you when you ride your bike. If it's the stuff that I showed to fix flats or any issues that might arise, or food and water, because you want to have no stops. Okay, now is not the time to go on a ride and stop midway at a gas station to get a Gatorade, or at a coffee shop to get coffee or whatever. I know those options are available, but it's probably not the smartest time to do it right now in the middle of a bike ride. So save those kind of post-ride beers to another time, maybe at your house. Yeah. Any questions so far?
Yeah, we have a few more, and I will say that we're coming up on 8 minutes till 5 o'clock, and I want to be mindful of your time, Rotem, and everyone else joining. We can extend this webinar past an hour. It certainly doesn't need to end, but to whatever extent, Rotem, that you need to cut this off, we'll be very mindful of that. So if we're going to kind of aim for the 5 o'clock time frame, we have 3 more questions. One is, how important is sweet spot training during the second go at base season because of COVID-19?
How important is the sweet spot training? I think it's very important, especially as they mentioned, having a second base. I think it's very important. It's probably the best use of your time. But you have to consider what I mentioned beforehand when it comes to, you need to be very honest with what's considered a moderate or higher than moderate training intensity for you now. So if you're used to doing that because you've done your base and you stayed in shape and you didn't have any big break in your training since this whole COVID thing started, then yeah, probably doing sweet spot training is good. But progression is key, and not overloading is key at this point because of the immune system response. So what you're used to doing, take 20% off of it and start from there. That would be my recommendation.
Great. And then where is the easiest KOM in town?
There are no such thing. No easy KOMs in Durango. And to whoever posted that question, if you find out one, then please let me know as well.
Wonderful. And this is the one I've been saving. I think it's kind of just a good topper. And honestly, for me, I'm not a strong cyclist. So what are your top recommendations for someone who is new to learn about their bike?
Let's pick on you specifically. So what, for an example, what would be kind of the goals of such a rider? Just enjoying more mountain biking trails, or just being out there for riding?
Yeah, for me, it would be mountain bike trails.
Okay. Um, I think it would be handpicking your trails is gonna be probably your most important thing. So I'm kind of actually going through the same thing with my wife Kate, who picked up mountain biking as well. And she's not a mountain biker; she's horse rider. So I had to really handpick the trails and in the right order, so it doesn't overwhelm her. So like for an example, the very first trail network that I took her to was Falls Creek because it's mostly flat and she can get the feeling of what it's like to ride in a single track on a bike, and then kind of move on from one technical trail to another. It's very important to have people who can give you kind of immediate feedback, who can ride with you, are willing to put the time and ride with you and tell you, oh, okay, you know, I think you're ready for this trail, or this should be the next thing for you. I think that's important because trying to just kind of figure it out all by yourself could be very discouraging. Um, I think for a beginner rider, it's important to get a basic bike fit at a bike shop. That could save a lot of just discomfort. I feel a lot of people who start biking, you know, they feel a lot of discomfort and they think, oh, that's just how cycling is until you get used to it. And that's not necessarily true. It's a lot of it is, you know, just getting a bike fit. Even if you're a beginner, just go to the bike shop and tell them, hey, I just got this bike, and I would like for you guys to help me just adjusting it, just so it's in the ballpark. Let's see, what else?
We had another question come in. What about the apps and online training programs? Any that you recommend specifically? Oh, the apps and online training programs.
Oh, what apps and online training programs?
Yes.
So first of all, trainingpeaks.com, you can search for a coach if you want to have a personal cycling coach. That's one option, but if you don't want to commit to a full-on coach, they do have training plans on site that they offer. For an example, if you want a 3-month program for beginner level who has 10 hours to ride a week. So that's a good option. Training Peaks is a very good source for coach athlete type of information. They have good articles as well. I use it personally to coach all of my athletes. Another option would be to do a fitness or performance test here with us at Fort Lewis at Durango Performance Center. That's a cycling performance test where it's not just for elite athlete or professional athletes or for people who have a lot of time to train. It could be just a very simple, basic fitness assessment where through that kind of hour to 2 hour appointment, I can see the strengths and weaknesses in your fitness, and I can define training zones, and then we go through kind of a consultation together where I go through questions to understand what's your lifestyle, what are your goals, how much time do you have to train, what's your motivation, sources of motivation in terms of you rather train in the gym or you want to be on your bike more. And then I put together a training plan for the next, 2 or 3 months. And then after that time, a person can come again to do retesting and see if they improved or did not improve, and if there are any modifications that need to be made. So it's kind of like, I'd say, a very quick way to get a good and thorough personal guidelines, and it's not personal coaching. So it's not a coach one-on-one where you have to be, kind of show your data to a coach on a day-to-day basis, but it's more of, okay, let's see your fitness and questions to go through kind of an interview to understand what the person wants from their training, and then you get a training plan for the next few weeks or months, and then you can do a retest and another consultation like a few months later.
Awesome. Well, why don't I make everyone a panelist, and then we can turn on your screens. And if there are further questions from there, just go ahead and we'll make sure that you're unmuted too. So hang tight. It does take a little bit of time. It almost looks like you get kicked out when you get into panelists. So stick with us if you want to be a part of this. So hang on.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Let me show my doggo here. Come on, come here. I don't think she wants to. This is Stella.
Oh, Stella. Oh, it's so great to see everyone's faces.
Let's see. Hey, Charlotte.
Hey, Rotem.
How are you?
How are you doing? I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Hey, Kyle. I think you're muted.
Dave.
Hey, thanks for putting this on. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. No problem. Sean, I see Sean is here. How are you doing? That's good.
Oh, hey, yeah. I'm good. Thanks. This is awesome.
Hey, you didn't graduate from the fort.
I know, but I saw an email about this, so I thought, hey, I'll learn something.
Awesome. And we had one person call in that we couldn't move over to panelists. Sorry to that person, but we're all here.
Awesome. I have a question for Kyle.
Yes.
So some people might not know Kyle, but he's a professional ultra runner. He graduated from Fort Lewis with exercise science degree. He was also my intern at Durango Performance Center. You know, we came across, he was running, I was biking, and I was wondering, you know, how he's dealing now with the COVID, because I coach many athletes, and I have to say as a coach, it's been really interesting for me to see how every single athlete is handling the situation differently. And I was wondering, you know, just because I know you, I feel like I know you a little bit personally, and I was wondering, how are you dealing with that, you know, preparing for an unknown season, racing season?
I've been really motivated by a lot of these challenges and social media kind of events going on. And so actually training has been going really well, just with having extra time. And I guess I generally don't go to the most crowded trails. That's really the only difference as far as other training, and I guess training partners too. Just being much more selective about who I run with, or if I run with anybody.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that it's a little bit harder to, say, push harder paces, higher intensities in your training nowadays because you don't know when the race is, or you're like, it doesn't really matter?
I think the second one, I think it matters less. I'm pretty motivated by some other goals going on.
Okay.
Sean actually want to talk to you about that. Looking at going out to Tahoe soon, whenever that opens up anyway. But yeah, a lot of internal motivation rather than, you know, races or things like that to motivate training.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's great. Anyone has any other questions or anything they want to share, actually?
I kind of agree with that. I feel like it's almost a blessing in disguise. Like it's hard, but for me, it's also been like, as an athlete, like turning the other way and trying to be a good role model, because I have seen a lot of like group rides still going around, and it's frustrating because it's like we're all in this together. But so it's really forced me to become a role model on, you know, this is social distancing. You know, how can I help other people through this process rather than just all the bashing people for what they're doing wrong. It's more of like becoming a role model.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And
I agree. It is disheartening to see big groups of whether it's hikers, runners, or cyclists, and they don't live together. You just know that. And whether they're 2 feet apart or 10 feet apart, like you said, the bubble is, I think we're very fortunate to be in Durango because we do have so many awesome trails right in town. And I don't want those people to mess it up for me so I can't have access to my trails. That would really piss me off.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, hopefully people do that eventually, but I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sean. As a lot of us, there's a big community of people here that live here because of the outdoors, whatever sport or activity we're doing. And that's been such, we take it for granted that we have this source of motivation at all times. We have this great outdoors at all times because we made that decision to move here and live here. But suddenly, we had that moment where it's like, oh, they might close our trails. And, I know that it freaked me out. Wow, what's really going to happen? Because this source of motivation to all the efforts that I put in, whether that be running or biking or whatever, it's suddenly it's disrupted, and I'm not sure how to operate on what fuel is going to get me out the door to do whatever I want to do if I can. So yeah, it's interesting, and I see it with athletes all over the world. I mean, I have a handful of athletes, for an example, in Israel who are professional athletes, and they've been on complete closure. They're saying they can't go out more than 100 meters outside of their house. So I mean, those athletes have been challenged greatly. And it's really interesting to see how it affects people differently, and that you get a glimpse over their kind of motivation and how their motivation works when things are changing, pieces of the puzzles are changing.
Right. And for, I imagine most of your clients are cyclists, so 100 meters on a bike, you can't really do anything. But I have one client, I'm a running coach, and he lives in South Africa, and he had about a 100-meter loop, so he can still kind of do 5Ks, on running or whatever. That's a little bit easier than on a bike, than just going out and back for 100 meters. Can't really do that. Just logistically, it doesn't work.
Yeah, you might enjoy this. I actually have an athlete that I coach right now. He's running. He's a runner as well. I mean, his goal was to go under 3 hours for a marathon, and he was he needed some challenge, and he has some space in his house or in his yard, so he has a 200-meter loop, which 200 meter for most people to understand, it's half the length of the track up at Fort Lewis. And so he just went on and did a marathon distance on this small 200-meter loop.
We're 11 laps.
Yep, just burning laps.
That's a lot of laps. Yeah, good for him. Did he go sub 3? I mean, that'd be hard.
No. It was more of okay, let's see what you can do, kind of at a tempo pace. Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
All these stories are so inspiring, and hearing about people who had races that were canceled. The first couple of weeks that started happening, there were people running 100-mile races just out their back door, and man, I think it's really cool seeing all that. And seeing you bike to Silverton back is still on the to-do list, still inspiring.
Sure. Cold. It'll still be cold there.
It was chilly the day I went. It was chilly. Yep. Yeah, Rotem's the one that helped me decide on that route for sure. So I appreciated that.
Yeah.
It was a good ride. It was a really good ride.
I've been seeing even myself, I'm going to be doing Everesting and Zwift. I'm the crazy Zwift person. and it's like 8 hours on Zwift. But like I want to, you know, raise money and I want to help other people, you know. And so, and a lot of people have been doing this. Like Emma Grant did Everesting on Mount Lemon last week to raise money.
Kyle did it on Hogsback a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
Who did?
I did.
Kyle did.
Oh my gosh.
You don't have to go outside this Zoom meeting to find an Everester.
Yeah. I think it's been pushing people to really help each other, which has been really great to see. Like even I'm still kind of a student at Fort Lewis, even though this is my last semester. I'm still like Zooming with my friends and people who are alumni, and I think it's opening another world of like video chat that we've known about and we've been around, but we've never like really stepped into until we're forced to, and it's been really fun.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Hagen here still? How are you doing?
Oh, doing good. Just got back from a ride over in the mountain park over there. And yes, there are a lot of people out there. And so now's not a good time to go try to get a KOM anywhere. That's for sure. But it seems like, you know, just really the past couple of weeks, I've seen less and less of groups of people or people that I know don't live together out riding. It's been one person or a husband and wife or someone and their kids or something like that. So I think people are getting it. And now that we have a little more trails to choose from around town, that helped out a lot.
Yeah, yeah. In the beginning, when it was just horse gulch, it was very challenging.
You're dodging people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane. In Park City here, it's still like there's a lot of people out in the streets that I haven't seen so many people in my life.
Awesome. Well, are there any other questions in terms of bike prep or exercise? I'm willing to go kind of off topic of like COVID for exercise stuff. If anyone has any question, just exercise in general, as most people here know that this is my greatest passion. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer.
I've heard some athletes getting, even like healthy individuals getting COVID. I know a couple. Do you know much on like the recovery? Like I hear someone tell me, you know, it's like it's nearly impossible, but how hard is it to recover? Because I know it's respiratory. So do you know like the time length it is if you get COVID?
I have no clue about that. And I think actually a lot of that information, at least from the very little reading that I've done about it, is they have assumption about how it stays in your body and how long, and if you do test negative afterwards, is it really gone, or is it like mono where, you know, it's there and it will only express itself when your immune system is down again or something like that. So the answer is I do not know, and I think that it's something that they don't know. They don't really know completely by this point. Does anyone know a little bit more information about that? Perhaps. Yeah. Yeah, because one thing that I do know, at least from cases that I've heard in Israel, is you can get sick and you can recover and you can get sick again second time. So it's not like you had it and then that's it and you recover and that's it. So and I think it's also to be aware of, even if a person has it and they recover, does that mean that they can still infect older people or other people afterwards, you know, which are in greater danger for worse symptoms? So I'm not sure, but I think that's just the uncertainty that what should motivate us to be a little bit more, not a little bit more, but a whole lot more careful with what we do. On a personal note, I think that the safer at home restrictions could be riskful, because I'm not sure most people understand what it means. You know, the fact that maybe we're after the peak of cases does not mean that that it's going away naturally. It's only the only reason why cases are not increasing at the same rate they were at the beginning is because we were pretty strict at staying at home and everything. So who knows what's going to happen right now when people might be a little bit less careful, or maybe even people think that, oh, it's pretty much gone, I don't need to worry about it, or especially like I'm not an older person, I'm a young person, so they say that it's safer at home, so I've been in my house for too long, I'm going to go about doing my regular stuff. So I personally even think that with those restrictions, I honestly think that for me, when I look at my own risks and my set of in-law parents that I really care about, is I'm going to be even more strict with myself, at least. But that's a personal decision. As I said earlier, it really depends on every person, whatever level of risk they're willing to take.
Yeah, I'm really worried about a second wave happening because people are going to think it's okay and it's fine to go back out and all of it's clear, and then we're going to get hit with another wave. And that's why I see USA Cycling as kind of like everyone is so confused still on like things happening in August. Like if they're going to cancel and they're thinking of pushing even the Tour de France, like it's so questionary on like, you know, are we going to go through that second wave because we lifted off too early? So I'm concerned about that too.
There's something that I think especially athletes need to understand right now. That's a conversation I had with a few of my athletes who suddenly races are putting dates, new dates for the races. And some of them might be September, October, November, whatever. But you need to understand that the fact that those race promoters are putting new dates is only so they, as race promoters, can start doing the work that's needed to happen 3, 4, 5 months before a big event. Okay, because if they're just gonna wait until everything is completely open so they can do everything, they're not gonna have a race to see. So they're putting a date out there. At least they can do all the communication, the Zoom meetings, and everything. So if everything rolls nicely, then maybe that race will happen. But it's with, it's kind of like, I don't know, going to Las Vegas and betting on something. It's like, yeah, you put the date over there, but it may happen, it may not, but at least there is a date they can push things to. So,
yes.
So I think the athletes should understand that it's not that race promoters putting the date and it's for certain going to happen, then they need to put all their hopes, all their eggs in one basket when it comes to their motivation and really rely on it, because then they might get disappointed again. There is a solid chance that will happen.
Yeah, as an athlete, I would not register for any more races the rest of this year.
Yep.
For at least a few months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so how do you go about that? Because I was thinking, as an athlete, it's for being an endurance athlete, training, I mean, it takes so many years. So 1 year of like not racing is not like the end of the world for us. Like it's extra time to train, but then shifting your training to like, yeah, I'm kind of like doing another base season, but should I like make mock races? Because it's also like, I was training my body to peak at certain times this summer. Should I still like peak at those moments so my body is ready next year when everything kind of like settles back to normal?
My thought about this, and it's not just a thought, my strategy that I use as well with the athletes is, my clear answer to you would be no, you should not peak, because if you're looking at peaking in a way where it's priming your body to a certain time and a certain level, then you're only viewing yourself as a machine. Okay, you're viewing yourself, you know, just as a machine, as I do 1, 2, 3, 4. That way, you know, my engine and my body are all tuned up for a race. But peaking, as we all know, you know, it's way more than that, and it's greatly dependent on mental states, emotional states, even having stress levels at the, you know, just at the right ideal level. So, and that's, I think it's impossible to do when you do not have your regular kind of rhythm of motivation, okay? When you don't have your set, kind of like your normal set of motivation pieces of the puzzle, okay? So that's why I think that just the general recommendation of going back to base is generally right, because when you think about when you're doing base, when you're deep in winter, your motivation is not relying on any race that's going to happen next month. I mean, you're doing the work because you like what you're doing and you're enjoying what you're doing in anticipation to progress, you know, hopefully a linear progression, and get to a point at some point that you're going to race and you're going to peak. But as of right now, I think the most important is to, for every athlete, whether you're a coach who's coaching athletes or you're an athlete yourself, you have to really honestly figure out what are the sources of motivation that the athlete can intake motivation from and put good efforts towards. So what are good things that you can do that you can get good efforts and good training and keep motivation, okay? Because if you're just sitting on the trainer and pushing hard and thinking that's motivating and it's not, yeah, you might suffer through a week or two or maybe even a month, but at the end of that, you'll be maybe trained, but then under-motivated. But it's, you know, a great coach told me, and I believe you know that, coach, that it's better to be under-trained and over-motivated than being overtrained and under-motivated, okay? Because it's not just about having a fast Ferrari car when the driver doesn't know what they're doing, you know? You want to have a fast car and a driver who's motivated and knows what he's doing. So
Awesome.
that said, having an honest conversation about the sources of motivation with your athletes, or if you're an athlete also with doing that conversation with yourself, is extremely important at this point. And that's why I personally do not prescribe very structured day-to-day training plan to any of my athletes right now. Not to say that they have some structure or some plan or some guidelines, which they do need, but I do not write like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this is what you need to do, because it's just their motivation is so out there right now, okay? It's so different than what it used to be. So that's why it needs to be a little bit more just listening to whatever the body is saying or the mind is saying in terms of what you feel like doing. If there's one thing that's going to give you motivation to do, if it's a Zwift race, or if, I don't know, if it's a challenging type of segment, just like Kyle mentioned, doing Everesting or something, hell, if that's going to give you more motivation and you're going to get a massive amount of effort, whether that be volume or intensity, doesn't matter so much at this point, then go ahead and do it. But if it's soaking motivation out of you, just like a structured training plan at this point, then it's probably not the smart thing to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very insightful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other notes? Sean?
One more biking question. I wondered if you could go over your personal pros and cons over carrying the weight of like your gear and your tools on your bike versus on like a hip pouch or camelback or something like that.
I think it greatly depends on the length of the ride. So if you're doing a touring ride, I try to put as much weight on the bike. If you're going on shorter rides or training rides, I don't know, typically I filled it up, personally, up to like 4 hours, 3-4 hours. Then if I carry a camelback or even a fanny pack is a little bit more comfortable, and doesn't put any pressure on the shoulders. And it's a fanny pack also just distribute the weight more evenly. It's closer to the center of mass as well. That's fine if it's on you on shorter rides, but if you're doing a long day or long days, putting almost all your extra weight from different stuff on your bike is very important, because it's not, I mean, it's also the load on the small muscles that help you stabilize, whether that be your spine muscles and also, just kind of hunching over your shoulders if you're holding a camelback or anything. But it's also just pressure on the saddle. So if you have, even if it's just 5-10 pounds of fanny pack or a camelback or anything, even in your pockets, is that weight is just more weight, also more pressure on the saddle, which it probably okay on shorter rides, but on long rides, it does yield to injuries that we don't really enjoy in the long term. So I'm assuming that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Any other notes? Any other questions?
Thank you. I really appreciate this. This is great.
Yeah, it's good to see that we have a crowd of endurance-loving people here. We're willing to meet and chat about those things. Maybe that'll get me to do some kind of a forum of endurance professionals. When I meet professionals, not just athletes, there's people who are professionally involved. Create a forum of that as part of DPC or FLC, do something like that.
Well, feel free to come back anytime, Rotem, but thank you sincerely for taking your time today and sharing your expertise with us, and for everyone that joined. This is really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rotem.
Great.
Riding, happy running.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Awesome. Thanks again, Rotem. This was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Yeah, that was good. That was great.
Okay. Well, anything else you need from me or feedback from your point of view as a host?
I don't know. I felt like it went really well. My feedback is, seeing that I know that there are always a lot of people who are kind of professional endurance people, not necessarily just athletes, and I think that gives me motivation to open some kind of a forum of people to talk about those things, and that could be a good kind of a feature for Fort Lewis or the Durango Performance Center. Yeah, so at some point, hopefully once we can all gather together in groups, then I think I'll put some kind of meetings for those. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And if something comes up later and you think about it even next week and ways to improve, always reach out. But again, I just can't thank you enough. This was fantastic.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Krista.
Absolutely. You too. And enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.